Good evening, and thank you for joining us on the second edition of the Swingers PGA Podcast. My name is Harrison, here with my brother Mason. Whatever brings you to our podcast, we thank you for doing so, whether you're a friend or a family. It doesn't matter. We're trying to grow this thing from the ground up, and we appreciate your support, Mason. What's going on, bro?
Nothing much. Just ready to record another episode. Excited to talk about this week's golf tournaments going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a pretty cool golf story from the day. Did you have you had anything interesting in your personal golf life happen as of late?
Well, been playing pretty good golf recently. Broke 100 for the first time I guess it was last week, and then have continued by shooting 98 and 97 the past couple of days, which has made me pretty happy. It's been a long way coming, and I'm finally starting to see some progress. So that's been great.
Yeah, dude, nice. Congrats. If you did not catch our first episode, obviously one thing unique about our podcast is that neither me or Mason are particularly good at golf. We just kind of like talking about playing golf. So that's really where our interest lies. Um, if you don't know, we're obviously very excited this week to be in Central Kentucky. That's where we're based out of, Nicholasville and Lexington, respectively. Nicholasville will host the Barbasol Championship this week, which is something that is very exciting here at Champions, part of the Keene Trace Golf Club. I do have a really interesting golf story from the day. It was pretty interesting because I was at Keene Trace, just hitting on the range, and right next to the clubhouse, there's a workout facility along with the pool. And I'm walking down to just do a brief workout before I go home, whatever. And right by the pool, I see this big bus. I'm like, that's really cool. The bus was super nice. I was mainly there just to go check that out. I was like, I want to go see this thing. It looks really sick. I walk down there, and I see these three kids that got golf balls in their hands. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. It's probably a player. I pop around the corner, rise around. I'm coming to the front of the bus, right where the entrance to the bus is there. I see him, and I'm just completely starstruck by the man, the myth, the legend, John Daly, signing a couple golf balls. And my mouth opens, and I literally didn't say anything. And within the span of a couple seconds, there he was, and there he was gone. Didn't get my picture made with him or anything, but I'm going to try again tomorrow. Hopefully, we'll get some action with him. So that was kind of something cool that happened today.
Yeah, awesome. It's a really cool experience just to be around all these players, especially during the next few days, because obviously they'll be more inclined to talk to people like you who are members of the club and seeing them around and stuff. So it's really cool to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. Before we forecast the gambling side of golf, I wanted to know. I was thinking about this earlier, just how much of a roller coaster betting on golf can be over the course of the last month. 4 weeks ago, I was like so dead in the water. I was like, there's no way I'm going to come out on top. Ended up breaking even. The middle second and third week, complete opposite. I was like, there's no way I can lose. All my guys are rolling. They all fall apart in the fourth round. I get nothing. And same thing happened this past weekend where I was just dead in the water, couldn't get anything going. Steve Stricker was my main play. He didn't really – it's not that he played bad, but he didn't really show up. And once again, just got lucky there at the end and broke even. So it's a weird game to be a part of gambling on.
I feel the same way. Every guy that I feel like is confident in, he's doing well through 3 rounds, and then the fourth round really just kind of falls apart. It's happened 3 or 4 times now. It's tough stuff.
And that's what makes it beautiful too. Is it's you got to hold your breath really at all times because it's gonna fall apart, or vice versa. Somebody can make a huge run and win the thing just like that. Well, anyways, let's move on to the subjects for this week's episode. To forecast this episode, we will be talking about this past tournament this weekend, the John Deere Classic, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the tournament that probably more people are interested in listening and learning about, the Open Championship across the pond with our friends. And then we'll conclude with the Barbasol Championship here at Champions in Nicholasville. And that's really where we're at. Mason, what were your main takeaways? Were there any players that you have got your eyes on coming out of the John Deere Classic?
Yeah, I do actually. There's two players that really, I think, who are pretty close to the top of the field here for the Barbasol Championship, and that's Seamus Power and Luke List. Luke List is a guy who I've really narrowed in on, and that's mainly just because of how accurate and good he has been off the tee, where he ranks 11th on the entire PGA Tour with zero point 0.6 strokes gained off the tee, and he did pretty well with that. And it's just a guy that really all over has been pretty solid, but has really struggled with the putter and is minus 2 strokes gained, or I guess strokes lost, with his putter. So obviously he played really well last week and got himself a tied fourth finish. And hopefully he can keep that pace coming and have a good week this week.
Yeah, for sure. Luke List is a guy that we know has been super successful off of the tee. I will definitely elaborate more on the type of players I'm looking at, so I don't want to go too far into him right now. But I definitely want to talk about some players that are coming out of the John Deere that will be playing in the Open Championship as opposed to Barbasol, and then I'll circle back later to the Barbasol guys. Um, Several guys that I really would like to see back in maybe a level playing field. Russell Henley, I would say, is a guy who's got an outside chance this week across the pond. He was pretty good last week. Just never really could get anything going with his putter, but he ranked, I believe, yes, let's see here. He ranked 6th in strokes gained with the approach and just lost strokes to the field with his putter. And he was decent off of the tee, but that was really brought down by a couple of rounds with bad driving. And another guy that I was really hoping would end up at Barbasol and didn't was Kyle Stanley. He was right up there, ranked 3rd in strokes gained tee to green, gaining 2.5 strokes on the field, losing 1.75 strokes to the field with his putter. He's a guy who will definitely fly under the radar as he finished tied for 41st at the John Deere. I think he could show up at a nice price and score. And then another guy that I'm going to keep using in my top 20 plays is Doug Gim. Just seems to be really playing well as of late, can make a lot of birdies. And one other guy, HV3. Once again, a 3rd round. He just couldn't throw his game all together to complete, to really contend. He had a bad 3rd round that threw him out of contention. But once again, showed up on Sunday, put a run. It was just too far out of it, couldn't win. So he's another guy that I will keep an eye on this week. Mace, do you have anything else you want to say about the John Deere, or are you ready to move on to the Open Championship?
No, I don't got anything. Let's go ahead and move on to the Open.
Sounds good. Well, Mace, I know that you specialize and spend a lot of your time this week really focusing on, the Open Championship. And it's not really my cup of tea, per se. Can you tell? I guess the first thing that came to my mind when thinking about this Open Championship was the link style golf over in the United Kingdom at the Royal St. George course. We had the pleasure of being able to go to Kiowa Island for the PGA Championship, kind of a similar Wendy's type open link style course. Can you tell me about what you know about how this course is going to play this week?
Well, obviously, like you said, it's very windy, and it's not really like anything we really have over here in America. It's a unique style of golf that can be brutal, and like you said, we kind of saw parts and pieces of that at Kiowa Island. And the wind really, when we were there, wasn't even that bad. I don't think the gusts really got above 10 miles an hour, but it can really get whipping over there, and it's really tough to play. I mean, so for me personally, I feel like you kind of have to favor guys who are used to that wind, and it's definitely a type of golf where you can automatically put some guys out just because they're not used to it or haven't played in that type of way in a long time. And it's hard, obviously, to pick a guy that isn't going to be able to handle those wind conditions or doesn't have the game that fits the course that we're playing.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's dive right into that and take a look at this odds board. So John Rahm, the heavy favorite, plus 750. He is less than half the price of his next competitor, Brooks Koepka. Rory McIlroy sharing the same price of 1,600. Dustin Johnson 18, Jordan Spieth 1,800, Justin Thomas 1,800. along with Xander Schauffele as well, 1,800. You got Bryson DeChambeau at 25, Louis Oosthuizen 28, Tyrrell Hatton 28, Victor Hovland 28. Out of those names, do you have interest in any of those players at that price?
At the price, I wouldn't specifically say I'd definitely be looking at some of the guys, but none of those prices really appeal too much to me. The only price that I think I would be willing to pay is a Jordan Spieth price, and that's just because I believe that him, along with Jon Rahm, really have been the best players so far during this 2021 campaign. Jordan Spieth obviously got it going pretty early at the Waste Management in Phoenix, where he got fourth, and then has had a flurry of really chances where he's finished second multiple times, was third at the Masters, and then obviously won his home event at the Valspar Open in Texas. And really, to me, the only person that I could even put on the same level of him as playing golf this year is Jon Rahm, who we've seen really start to come on and, winning the U.S. Open, and then would have won the Memorial the week before if he wasn't forced to withdraw due to COVID, which obviously we saw a lot of complaining and uproar from a lot of the different players and fans that has changed some of the rules that we've seen where they don't have to be tested as much anymore. But those two guys really, to me, are the only ones that I would really risk. I wouldn't mind a Xander Schauffele play just because I believe he's probably one of the more consistent players out of the guys that you mentioned, and really the only one that I would like out of those. But, I mean, all the other guys, I would consider fades, and the biggest fade that I would play probably is Rory McIlroy. In his past two competitions, he was cut from the Scottish Open and tied 59th in the Irish Open, both link-style courses that are big for big tournaments, obviously, as their country's opens. And they're comparable to what we're seeing this week, and it really scares me that over the past 2 weeks has barely made the cut and then missed the cut in links golf. It just scares me off the price, considering he's the second favorite.
Yeah, I totally agree. One thing that concerns me about Jordan Spieth is his driving accuracy. If he has a wonky week driving the ball, I think that could really pose some problems. But with his ball striking and his ability around the green, I really see it's going to be difficult for me to see him, not have some sort of success on a course that's going to favor approach play. And then, I totally agree with your other points as well. One exercise I wanted to do was really go over, the recent winners from this tournament. In 2019, Shane Lowry, 18, Francesco Molinari, 17, Jordan Spieth, 16, Henrik Stenson, 15, Zach Johnson, 14, Rory McIlroy, 13, Phil Mickelson, 2012, Ernie Els, 2011, at this same course, Royal St. George's, Darren Clark, and 2010, Louis Oosthuizen. Mace, do you notice anything interesting about those names?
From what I understand, this course has had a few or not this course, but this event has had a few American winners over the past 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Of those, I guess it's 10 names that I just gave. 3 of them, Phil Mickelson, Zach Johnson, and Jordan Spieth, were Americans. The rest were foreign-based players. But if you take a look at the odds board, the majority of the players, I believe the 7 out of the top 10, are American players. So one concern I had was with the lack of success that Americans have had in this tournament, it's really getting stuck into a player at these short prices.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. To me, this historically has been a European-dominated event, and it's for pretty obvious reasons. This is links golf, something that we really don't have at all in America. I mean, you can get aspects of it with the wind or customized courses to make it feel like links golf, but we don't have true links golf that a lot of these European guys grew up playing and are basically their home courses, considering that Americans really, top guys have probably only played links golf 50 times max in their careers. And so it's just hard for me to really guarantee those Americans at the top of the board just because of how historically it has been dominated by European players, which makes me feel that European players will win this tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, with that said, and you were telling me a little bit about this earlier. Do you want to go ahead and follow up with what you just said with some of your best plays from the week? Because I understand in your best plays you actually do have an American. Is that right?
That's true. One of my favorite picks this week is Scotty Scheffler, who is currently listed at plus 5,000. And this is for a few reasons. He's obviously a Texan along with Jordan Spieth, so they're used to playing in pretty high winds. But one thing that did stick out to me was his style of play and his tied 8th finish at the PGA Championship and his tied 12th finish at the Scottish Open last week. And that's obviously links golf, which to me gives me a little bit of confidence, or a lot of confidence, that he can perform in this type of way. Both these courses have shown, obviously one of them is a links course, and the other has shown the wind that we could see. So this is a play that I love, and I've been all over Scotty Scheffler for the past couple weeks, and this is something where I could definitely see him making top 10, top 5, maybe even winning the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be quite an event to see if Scotty Scheffler were to pull off his first win, because of course he doesn't have a PGA Tour event win yet. That would be something to see. And uh, if you're listening and you're confused about that, saying it's you shouldn't like Americans because Americans typically don't win this event. I think this is a little bit different because you've got Scotty Scheffler at a little bit of a price here. So he's 50-1 to win this tournament. I'd be much more willing to put my money there and bet on that occurring than getting really stuck into a different price, a short price, particularly from one of the other American players. And do you have any other plays that you like on the week?
One other play that I'll go ahead and mention, it's not my favorite, but I definitely see potential, and that's Louis Oosthuizen at 2,800, I believe. And obviously, he's been a player who has always contended at major championships. Has won this major champion, has won the Open, I believe, in 2011, maybe.
It was 2010, yeah.
But has won this event. But he's always one of those guys who I would compare to Brooks Koepka, maybe not to the success of Brooks Koepka, but always appears to kind of show up for these major championships, as he did at the PGA Championship, where he finished tied second. And at the price, I would prefer Scheffler over him, but I really could see him going low and really contending. And it's just a guy that I think will have success this week.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think Louis definitely appeals to me more as a top 10 or a top 5 type of bet this week, as opposed to his odds in the U.S. Open, which were around 55-1. He is half that price this week at 28-1. So you're going to have to really love Louis to be willing to take that price. But like you said, he seems to always show up in these types of competitions. The downside with Louis is that they say sometimes he can be a little bit nonchalant about his business. So you never know really what you're going to get, but his record speaks for itself. So I'm totally willing to support that pick. Scrolling further down the board, do you have some longer shots on the board that you would be willing to throw your money at?
One guy I'll go ahead and mention is Jason Kokrak, who is at plus 20 or 12,500, and he's obviously a guy who's been playing really well this year, has 2 wins under his belt, and has really just performed pretty well, having a career year in almost all of his statistics, especially his putting, where he's really improved, and which has basically led him to his success that he's had. And is a guy for at the number who I wouldn't mind throwing $1 or $2 on a top 20, top 10 bet, not necessarily a win bet, because I don't think he has, the experience or really is there yet to win this type of tournament. But I could definitely see him in a top 40, top 20 bet.
Yeah, I don't think it's crazy, and he's a player who's always been very strong off the tee and with his approach. His Achilles heel has always been his putting and around the greens. But at 125-1, I think it's worth a shot. Obviously, Mr. Kokrak, a big supporter of Eagle Rare, a Kentucky product, might I add. he's going to have to really try to keep the ball in the fairway and be good with his irons, because he is not particularly good out of the sand. And he has putted well this year, although he's historically not a good putter. But you never know. I can see that happening. Any other long names, or is that it for you?
I've got a few names, but I'll wait a few minutes to mention them when I get into my DraftKings lineup.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's go ahead and roll over right into that. Now that we've mentioned a few names to kind of get your wheels churning, you were really talking yourself up with this DraftKings lineup. So let's go ahead and hear it. Go ahead and get started.
I'm really confident with this lineup. I think it's got value all the way through, and it's really excited me, the potential that I think it has. And I'll go ahead and start off with Jordan Spieth at $9,700. And for the price, I think it's pretty good to get who I think is obviously, which I mentioned earlier, as one of the best players that we've seen this year. And I really think this style of golf kind of fits his game, trying to get the approach shots working. So I'm going to go ahead and start him with 9,700. And then next, we're going to move on to Louis Oosthuizen, who I also talked about. Really, the highlights of my team, both big guys, 9,300 for Oosthuizen and 9,700, both solid prices, I think, and have both been very successful this year, and I hope they continue. And then I'm going to go ahead and move to Scottie Scheffler at 8,200, which I think is a steal, obviously, along with his plus 5,000. I think they're both really good prices to buy in on Scheffler, and I'm really confident in his ability that he's shown this year, where he's had really strong performances really all year. And then I'm going to go ahead and name a few foreign players, because obviously I mentioned that I think foreign players are a little bit more likely to win this event, so I'm going to go ahead and throw a few more of those in. And first, that's Matthew Fitzpatrick at 7,900. And Matthew Fitzpatrick had a really encouraging performance last week and finished tied second at the Scottish Open, went to a playoff and ultimately lost, but that is really exciting to me to see that he can contend, and obviously being an Englishman gives me a little bit of hope that he'll pull through. Next, another Englishman, Ian Poulter, down at 7,200, and I mean, he was tied fourth at the Scottish Open. So really, the highlight of those two picks for me was seeing that they're confident and comfortable playing links golf and are playing well. You know, going into a major championship, you obviously want to be at the top of your game, and I think hopefully that they were at the top of their game that last week and can carry it over next week. And then finishing out, I'm gonna go ahead and roll with a Brendan Grace at 7,200, another 7,200 play like Ian Poulter. And another guy that's really just had a pretty solid year, tied seventh at the U.S. Open, fourth at the Memorial, and won an event, a lesser-known event, the Puerto Rico event. But, I mean, for me, this lineup, it's got everything. It's got a few Texans to play with the wind, some Europeans, and a couple South Africans. All guys who I feel comfortable with making the cut, and I'm really excited about the lineup and all the prices that I got. And a crazy thing that I think is I've still got $500 left over, so really if you wanted to switch one of these guys and move up the board a little bit, like switch it Oosthuizen or Spieth, and really go for a top player, it's possible. But I'm really confident with this lineup, and I think it's going to do really well.
Yeah, I love the lineup too, and I love some of the angles in which you've approached the lineup as well. Spieth is not necessarily a player I'm crazy about this week, but I think that he's a safe play. I think that's strong. Same with Louis. Scotty's good with the win. Fitz played great. Ian Poulter and Brandon Grace have been in form. And I think you've used a couple of angles that I really like here with short-term form, right? Are they playing well as of late? There's no question marks to any of these guys. Have they played well as of late? It seems pretty safe. I think that this lineup has a pretty high floor, meaning that I don't think that I would be very surprised if more than two of these guys missed the cut, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if all six made the cut. So I think you've done a good job here, and hopefully you can make some money out of that.
Yeah, that was really what I was looking for. Obviously, golf is a game where consistency is key, but you also have to look into how people are playing. And a lot of these guys, really all of them to me, have played some of their better golf in recent years during this 2021 campaign. And, with the confidence that I have with all these guys, I'm real comfortable with this lineup making all the cuts.
For sure. Well, would you like to say any last words about the Open Championship before we transition into the much more exciting Barbasol Championship?
I've got one more name that we kind of forgot to mention at the top of the board, and that's Colin Morikawa, who I think is just another name that I think out of the Americans that we listed at the top of the board is another guy that I like purely just because of his ball striking and his ability to keep the ball in the fairway. So, like I said earlier, I'm not too confident in Americans for this tournament, but is just another guy who I would prefer over a Brooks Koepka or Dustin DeChambeau. The list goes on, but it's just another guy that I would prefer, kind of like Xander Schauffele, just two guys that I would prefer over the rest.
Yeah, I think I'm about ready to transition, but I guess it would be unfair if we never even mentioned Shane Lowry, who is technically the defending champion of this tournament. He won in 2019, the Irishman. I presume he's got a pretty good chance. He's whenever he's on, he really plays well. So Shane Lowry at 40-1. I think that's a little bit short. I would imagine that's a little bit short based on the fact that he is the defending champion. But certainly wouldn't be surprised if he wins. Okay. And now we can transition on over to the Barbasol Championship, which will take place in our very own Nicholasville, Kentucky, starting on Thursday morning. Start off, there were some whispers today in town about the weather, although if you do know anything about Kentucky, particularly Central Kentucky weather in general, it's like whatever the weatherman says, just take that and assume that the opposite's going to happen. Thursday looks beautiful, and Friday, Saturday, Sunday, there's a chance of thunderstorms. So I presume that it's going to probably snow on Thursday, and we'll have tornadoes on Friday, and then who knows what's going to happen from there. It's going to get wild. But let's hope and pray that we get good weather for a good tournament here. The last 5 winners of this tournament, that's how we've had 5 tournaments at Barbasol for this event. In 2015, Scott Piercy won. 2016, Aaron Baddeley won. And 2017, Grayson Murray. 2018, Troy Merritt. 2019, Jim Herman. Some of those names are not the most prominent names, and historically this is not the strongest field, being that it is the same weekend as the Open Championship. And also on top of that, there are some other PGA guys that just take this week off to rest or whatever they have need to do for the week. Something about me is I'm very analytical. I want to understand the dynamics of this course. So I wanted to study what drives variation in scores at Barbasol. And the event average in driving that variation is about 40% to approach, 35% to driving, 12% around the greens, and 13% putting. Just to give you an idea of where that lies, the tour average for approach is about 35%. And once again, in this event, it's 40%. Meaning the amount of strokes gained approach in this tournament is a little bit more significant than it typically is. So when Mason mentioned Luke List earlier, he's at the top of the market, but he was not a player that I was particularly interested in because I wanted to find players that were really going to thrive in their approach play. And that's not to say that a player who is strongest off the tee can't win, but that's kind of where I wanted to try to focus my attention this week. Mace, do you have any thoughts about any of that?
I can understand where you're going with that, but he's a guy who has been rolling, and it's just what I thought was a pretty good play. Obviously, this tournament's a pretty hard tournament to predict, in my opinion, just because you don't have one of those top of the world players that's playing that you can for sure count on him to make a top 10 or really confident in him to win. This is a tournament where anyone really could make a strong run, in my opinion. It's just not that this obviously is one of the weaker fields that we'll see, and I think that just causes more variation where we could see different possibilities.
Yeah, absolutely, and there's a ton of truth to that, right? And I think I was playing by chance with a man named Chuck the other day, and Chuck had the most amazing handlebar. I guess you would call it a beard mustache. And he said, it's a game of misses. And I just think that that's so true, right? And what differentiates this field from some of the best players in the world is these guys are fantastic golfers. They're gonna go out there and they're gonna tear this golf course up. But compared to some of the guys that are playing across the pond this weekend, their misses are worse than the best players in the world, which drives that variation, right? So it could go a number of different ways. Just to name some names at the top of the board here, Charles Schwartzel, the South African, as the co-favorite with Seamus Power, 1,600. Luke List, 22. Russell Knox, 25. Grayson Sigg, 28. Hodges, 28. Patrick Rogers, 28. Taylor Pendrith, 28. Adam Schenk, 33. Stewart, 33. Davis Riley, 33. Henrik Norlander, 33. Wawrinski, 33. And the list goes on and on. There seems to be about 50 players within the 40 to 80 to 1 range, aka the market saying this thing's wide open. It could go a number of different ways. My advice from a gambling perspective on this would be to steer clear of the guys at the top of the market. I think if I was going to give a pick of some top of the market guys, I would probably have to go with Mason's pick of Luke List. Seamus Power does have some really nice course history here, but to take him at 1,600, I think is pretty crazy. He's pretty consistent. Maybe you could try to get him in a top 10 or a top 20. May not be a bad play. And then the other player at the top of the market I would recommend playing is Patrick Rogers, who has been in good form as of late. However, those are not really my prime plays, as you could say. I'm much more interested in trying to find some guys in the mid-tier range that I will have in my wins, but I'll also be playing, especially in like top 10 and top 20 markets. I guess I could start here with defending champion Jim Herman at 40 to 1. He won this thing in 2019. Although I was looking at his data, he won that tournament at 28 under, really gaining most of his strokes with a putter. He certainly could win at 40 to 1. I'm not interested at that price. A name at 40 to 1 that I am interested in is Mito Pereira, Chilean, who's won 3 times on the Corn Ferry Tour. He was really good last week off the tee and lost strokes to the field with his putter. Was decent with his irons, but he's a guy who could definitely fly under the radar, light up this the score. Jason Duffner is an old name that has played extremely well. He ranked 5th last week in strokes gained with his approach play, which, like I mentioned earlier, is a kind of a key stat that I'm looking at this week. Mr. Duffner also lost strokes with his putter, finishing tied 18th and 13 under. There was a ton of guys in that range. I could see him making some putts this week and doing all right. And then let's see here. The last name that I would like to at least mention is Camilo Villegas, the Colombian player. He led the John Deere last week in strokes gained tee to green with 2.67. Lost almost 2 strokes with his putter. He finished tied 41. He's flying under the radar, but he was sneaky good last week. He finished 9 under. But if his approach and his stroke and his driver is on this week, and let's hope he can make some putts, he could find himself up there as well. So those are 3 names that I'm interested in. Mace, are there any other players that I missed?
There's one guy who is in that range that I really like, and his name's Nick Taylor. He's a Canadian, and he's been on a really, really good run of form. Over his last 7 starts, he has only missed the cut 1 time where he's had the putter really rolling. And obviously, you mentioned the previous winners possibly having a little advantage with that putter. So at the plus 4,000, I think it's a solid play, someone that I wouldn't mind putting a top 10, top 20 bet on. And then one guy who I'm going to go ahead and mention closer to the top of the board with the fifth best odds at 2,800, and that's Grayson Sigg. This name kind of confused me at the top of the leaderboard, someone who I'd never heard of. And this is his first PGA event, which is a little concerning to me. Obviously, there's probably going to be some nerves, and I don't know if he's even won a Korn Ferry event. I think he qualified just with consistency with top 10s and top 20s on the Korn Ferry. But that name and the odds that it has really kind of confused me. Obviously, I was just kind of confused by his credentials, as he's not really done much, and I was confused why his odds were so high. So that's one player I'm going to go ahead and fade for this week.
Yeah, whenever you see names like that and you're trying to figure out what's going on, it almost is kind of scary. It's like, what do I not know that's going to happen?
Yeah.
But yeah, I totally agree with that point. One name I was surprised you didn't mention was the Seminole John Pack, who's been playing really well recently, but nobody really knows that name. He's 100 to 1. He's a player you could play underneath with potentially your top 20 plays. And one player that I'm certainly interested in going out and just watching drive the ball, 50 to 1, Wilco Neighbor. Dude just pounds the ball. I think he hits, what did you say? He drives it
I'm pretty sure his averages,
like 380.
His averages last week was like 380, or maybe his long was 380, but he was averaging like outrageous, like 360 yards. It was somewhere between 360 and 380 was his average for every single drive of the tournament, which is just outrageous. Like, that's right. I think the PGA Championship that we were at, the longest drive of the week was like 360. So it's just like crazy to see somebody consistently pumping it like that. And obviously, like you said, someone that is going to be so much fun to watch hit off the tee.
For sure. Yeah, and he recently came over. I believe he's a South African. But he had contended and played well in some PGA events that are stronger than this one. I don't know what his game's like outside of driving the ball, but at 50 to 1, he may be worth a couple dollars there. So maybe he can get in there and play well. But yeah, I think that's about all. I'm considering doing a course overview podcast that I will do tomorrow. I'm still trying to figure out if I'm going to do that or not. Other than that, that's really all that I have. Mace, would you like to conclude and wrap things up here for us?
Well, I'm going to go ahead and start this off with I appreciate anyone who's listening. If you're friends or family just trying to support us when we're trying to get this thing up and going, or if you're a listener from around the world. I saw today that we had a listener from Germany, and that's pretty cool, as we're just a couple guys from Kentucky. It's cool to see how far it's already gone. But we encourage that after listening that you drop a rating or a comment, good or bad, really just trying to give us some feedback. Feedback's power for us. It could be good or bad, like I mentioned. Anything to improve on, we would appreciate that, because obviously this is our second episode and we're still learning the kinks and all of that. So anything, any recommendations, things you liked, all is good, and we appreciate your support and feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. We're happy to build and expand upon any ideas that anybody has. And as Mason alluded to, we thank you for whatever reason that you're still listening to the podcast. We hope that you will think of somebody in your life who might find this podcast interesting, and you'll tell them about it. Other than that, we thank you for joining us this evening, and we'll see you next week for the next edition of Swingers PGA Podcast. Thank you.